Okay, this is 12 slides. This one could take a little longer because I'm reviewing a bunch of stuff for the midterm. This is a good one to take actual notes on and maybe even watch a couple of times. This is how to shoot video that doesn't suck part 2. And there's a lot of summary in here, and I go through the textbook and reiterate a few points. Essentially what I have done here is gone through most of the first 2/3 of the textbook all the way up to section 5 and made notes of what I think is important and put it down. So you're going to want to watch all the other lectures. I could pull all types of questions out of those, but if you just want the nuts and bolts, multiple choice type stuff, there are a lot of points here that I make. Yeah, maybe you've heard it before. Great, I don't care. Hope to reiterate some important points over the course of the semester. But if there's one to watch 2-3 times before the midterm, which comes up in a couple of weeks, this is the one. I'm going to review in a couple of slides, and then I'm going to go into some relatively new stuff, but it's all from the textbook. If you've been keeping up with your reading, then you will recognize everything I'm talking about, at least in general terms. What I think we've covered so far, there's a chapter in the textbook called Entertain or Die. The opposite of good is off. The whole point of this is to keep people's attention. Video is interesting because it takes people to the scene. It brings the sights and sounds home. You're there because they can't be there. Okay? And you're competing with people's conceptualizations of what good video is, or people's conceptualizations of what good video are. And people have many concepts of what makes interesting video. And it goes all the way from movies to the best documentary film they ever saw. If you're competing with, a documentary like Murder Ball, you better have great characters and a great story and great sound, a lot of compelling action, a lot of heart-wrenching detail. You're not going to get that in every single video news package, but you're going to include as much of it as you can, and you're going to pre-package your stuff whenever possible so that you can give yourself the best shot of capturing and maintaining audience's attention, making it memorable, and really getting news information across in an interesting way without sensationalizing, without overblowing the facts and saying something that's not true just to get people to watch your story or watch your show. All right, be entertaining, don't be sensationalistic. I'm going to harp on that for the entire semester if I haven't done enough already. Shooting with intent means that you want to show up at a scene, use your eyes first, and look around and see what's around you, and make sure that you know what needs to be in this story and that you have a plan. Okay? Shooting with intent means you're taking all of these lessons, you're putting them into play every time you press record in the camera. You're making sure that the subject is well lit, that the composition is structured well, that you're doing everything you can to make what you're showing to viewers aesthetically pleasing. So about the worst thing you can do is go out like somebody who's an amateur at a birthday party and just start shooting, spraying like a shotgun, the video camera, just grabbing everything in sight with no idea what the heck you're looking for. If you go to a scene the first time you go out for this to shoot a package for this class and you don't know what you're looking for, that's okay. That happens to everybody. It takes some getting used to. You have to do it a couple of times before you start to understand, oh, I should definitely go for this and not that. But when in doubt, go to the people and make sure that you have in your mind a focus for what this story is about and get more than enough. But don't just go shooting willy-nilly, just random scenes with 15 people running in and out of them. And don't let anything be dark, okay? So it seems pretty self-explanatory, but I do like to discuss in some detail what it means to shoot with intent. There are several other points of this. It's a pretty broad topic, but we're going to cover plenty over the course of this lecture. Make viewers care. One of the main ways that you make viewers care is to find a central compelling character, a CCC, a central compelling character, and build the story through that person's point of view. You want to make the video aesthetically pleasing. You want to use natural sound. You want to use action bites and regular sound bites and natural sound breaks. And obviously you have natural sound throughout all the B-roll throughout the whole story. But the main way you're going to make viewers care is if you bring other people into the story as soon as possible and bring the story out through their words and their emotions. You can be creative if you plan ahead. Being creative does not mean getting crazy shots that nobody understands what they are. It doesn't mean shooting Dutch angle kind of crooked shots. It means getting as much sound as you can, as much net sound and as many action bites as you can, and anticipating where the action is going to happen. In the book, they talk about shooting a graduation, and you know the shots that are going to happen in a graduation. So you can be creative by setting the camera up and waiting for the action to come to you. The more you shoot, the more experience you'll get with that, and the more you'll be able to do it. But if nothing else, you should be able to go to a crawfish boil and know where the sound and the pictures are going to come from. You have to know your audience. For this class, your audience is Uptown New Orleans and the Loyola campus in particular. Generally, for most reporters, the audience is a city or a market area, a designated market area. But that's important for you to keep in mind whenever you're shooting. And remember, stories have a hero, a beginning, a middle, and an end. So this is another way of breaking it down. It's another way of dissecting what a package should have. But that hero is the same thing as a central compelling character. Once we know who that is, we need to establish what they're doing there. That's the beginning of the story. Some type of action and conflict would be the middle of the story. And the best, to the best of your ability, you should find a way to summarize it or bring it to an end, even though a lot of news stories are news because they're not completely over with yet. We're not looking for the resolution of CSI or something where somebody confesses at the end of every news package. That isn't going to happen. But you are going to be able to end the story with at least the latest information. Some more of what we covered. I break this out into its separate slide because it's so important when you're first learning and you're going out. I can remember when I shot and wrote and edited about 100 news packages in college at the University of Missouri that I fell in love with shooting video, but it was kind of because I had to. You know, it was either you love your craft, you have a passion for it, or you don't. And so I just decided I was going to get excited about the cameras. I just decided to make shooting fun. And so what you're doing is editing in the camera at all times. You're thinking about shots, not just thinking about video in general. You're thinking not just what is the action here, but what is it going to take to break that action down. There's an implied narrative. What I taught you from the very first day of class is whenever you line up a few shots in a row or a few images in a row, people will be able to create a narrative. If you just put a cheeseburger on a plate and then an empty plate and then a smiling man, you've probably got some dude who just ate a cheeseburger and it made him happy, okay? Those three images together can tell a story. So the first thing to think about is how your images are going to go together to have their own sort of visual grammar. The second thing you're thinking of is when you set up the camera that you compose it like a still shot. You're making a portrait, like a still photo or like a painting. It's a portrait that comes to life. Your composition must be great. Your lighting must be perfect. It must be in focus, obviously. And we'll talk about the finer points and the tools, but your key tools right now are manual iris and zooming and moving the tripod itself and tilting and leveling so that your shots are framed properly and the composition is good. So I'm going to go through that again. That was a quick list. But you want to make sure the shots are lit well. Make sure you're obeying the rule of thirds and other composition rules. You want to make sure and bring the tripod to the area where you're going to get the shot. Then you tilt in the area, and then you pan, and then you balance, you level off the shot, and then you grab it. You press record and hold still and count to 10. So we'll practice that. You'll get plenty of experience. We've already shown that in class a couple of times, but you're looking for portraits to come to life. And remember that what we do when we think in shots, we think about breaking processes down into smaller pieces, and what you're doing is you're taking the time out of the process. You're taking something that took maybe 15 minutes, breaking it down into 3 or 4 or 5 shots. So when you save people time and you get their attention, you interest them. This adds value. This adds value to what we do. Pretty much the whole reason that video news exists, that television news and video online news exists, is in order to save people time, keep it interesting enough to get their attention, and then we sell that attention. We sell the ability to advertise to different advertisers, local and national. So if you're not saving people time, if you're not taking them there and making them feel like they actually gained something in that minute and a half, if you're wasting their time instead of saving their time, not only are you going to bore them, but you're going to potentially lose them because they're getting a negative reaction where they were expecting something positive. Excuse me, a little more recap. Make sure that every picture contributes to the story. In the textbook, if you're telling the story of a birthday, you want to have birthday cake, birthday cake, birthday cake. You don't want to have any random shots that give no indication of what type of event this is. There should not be any video in your story that doesn't say something about the narrative at hand. You want to keep your stories short. Remember, we only shoot news, so we skipped a couple of chapters that start talking about the finer points of home video or shooting for film or movies or scripting things. We don't script things ahead of time, but we always need a script. But we create a script based on reality. We never repeat shots when we're editing. Never, ever, ever. Because if somebody's giving you 90 seconds of their time, they don't expect to see the same 10 seconds of video twice. Why would you do that? That's incredibly lazy. There must be something else you can take a picture of. Imagine if you were looking at a slideshow by a professional photographer, and they're showing you all the photos of your best friend's wedding. And I guess all my friends are getting married. A lot of you may not have friends getting married yet. But your best friend or a relative's wedding, and they show you, these are the 10 best shots that I took of the wedding. And they show you 8 shots, and then they show 2 of them twice. And you're saying, wait, that was only 8 shots. You doubled up on 2 of them. I want my money back. So we don't repeat shots. There's got to be something else that you can take video of. Or it's not a very visual story, and you need to ask yourself if this is one that's worth doing for this medium. And don't wing it. Don't just show up without a plan. That just essentially means when you read the topic of what a story is going to be, that you have in your head at least a few sequences that you're likely to get. You don't go to a crawfish boil and just start pointing the camera in every direction. You should anticipate a line of people getting served, people actually eating crawfish and getting close-ups of all that. You should figure out if there's going to be a Beta root beer or a Beta beer, real beer. Make sure you get shots of people having a good time. If there's music, get the camera to the music. And when you're doing interviews, get the heck away from the music so it doesn't ruin it. But don't wing it. Have a plan. Even if it means spending the first 5 minutes on a scene or at an event, figuring out what the plan should be. It's much better to blow the first 5 minutes and conduct the next half hour with a plan than to just run around like a chicken with your head cut off trying to grab everything without any idea what you're doing, because you will miss something if you do it that way. Get a shot list in your head, like I just said. Edit in the camera. I've already covered, but essentially if you set up a shot like a well-constructed portrait and you press the record button, you let it roll for 10 seconds, and then you stop it, and then you move the camera and you set up the shot and you let it get steady, and then you press record, let it sit still for 10 seconds, you will have a series of steady, well-constructed, well-composed shots that you can cut into your package. Essentially any shot that you took can go into your package. What you do not do is show up and point the camera in 5 different directions and let it roll for 4 minutes straight. You're not going to have time to cut that. I don't care how good of an editor you think you are. I don't care how much time you think you're going to have on the editing end. It's not doing yourself a favor. It's not going the extra mile. It's the very basic, simple, absolute entry-level professional step to have all of your shots airable. Because maybe you're going to take this video someday at a station and give it to somebody else to use, and they're not going to have any idea that this one shot starts to shake 5 seconds in. All right? Set it up. Make sure set it up, make sure that it's steady. Press record again, and move on. When I say your stories guide your location, that's just because the book talks about choosing locations, and you don't have the option of choosing the location for a specific story, but you do have the option of choosing a story that's going to have a good location. Think about if it's going to be raining. Think about if it's going to be a bunch of people sitting around in a lecture hall. Is that really the story that you want to tell? Is there something else going on that week that has more visual components to it? You have to think about the video before you go on a story, before you decide to even call it a story. Is it going to be visual enough? That said, if you go to a performance in Roussel Hall, there are plenty of people who've done good stories, good visual stories on performances, and Roussel, performances of, classical music or choirs or whatever the heck they do down there. The point is you have to actually get shots of the action. You have to get video of the people performing. I don't want to see a bunch of shots of people sitting around. There's just nothing interesting about that, whether it's a musical performance, whether it's outside at a Feidodo, I guess that was inside and outside, or if it's at a city council meeting. I don't want to see a bunch of people sitting around. When it comes to choosing your gear, the School of Mass Comm has chosen your gear to be high-end prosumer, on the borderline between professional and consumer. It looks a little bit bulky to some, but it's a lot lighter than the Panasonic cameras we have are a lot lighter than they used to be. But what you really need to know is all the buttons are out where you can get to them. And the whole point is being able to work with your stuff to have more control without having to go through menu after menu after menu. And to have a substantial camera sometimes can be in your benefit. People can take you more seriously, and they're going to believe that you're there doing something for class or something real, because you're not just showing up with some little handy cam. Okay, so we chose your gear so that you could shoot on relatively affordable media, the quality would be professional quality, and that you would have the ability to get professional audio with the XLR cables, and you would have the same manual iris, shutter control, manual zoom, and even manual focus once you get good at that. Okay, editing in the camera, reiterated. There's a whole chapter on it in the book, so I'm going to go back, talk about it again for a couple more minutes. It takes planning. Like I said, show up at a scene, look around for 5 minutes, figure out what you need to shoot, then get going and start, you can call it making pictures if you want to. People, so many times when I was out on news stories in Iowa Quad Cities, people were like, oh, are you making pictures? And I would kind of think, well, we're shooting video, and I was a little snobby, but then you realize, I finally stopped being snobby, and I just said, yeah, we are. That's what we're doing. We're making pictures, because it does take an act of creativity. There is something to having an eye for videography and photography that not everybody has. It's not the same to just go and shoot stuff as it is to go and plan out and make sequences. So you make pictures that make sequences, you make sequences that make stories. Talked about this so many times. Set up a shot. First you set the tripod, then you set the camera up. You tilt it and you pan it and you level it, and you set the composition up according to rule of thirds, and the shot is well lit. Then you take your hands off, you make sure the camera is steady, then you press the record button. Count to 10, press the record button again, and then you start setting up your next shot. Do that 25 to 30 times and you've got video good enough for a package, a professional looking package. Focus your shot means find the hero. In the textbook, it talks about focus not in terms of using the focus ring or using the autofocus. It's talking about finding a hero for your story, always, every time. So be sure that your shots have clear and identifiable subject or subjects. Usually no more than 3 or 4 people. Usually it's 1 or 2 people. Sometimes the hero of a shot can be an inanimate object. I think in the textbook they use a bottle of alcohol that's in the private investigator's desk drawer. It's one of those classic cutaways. You can have shots of inanimate objects that still have a hero, but it should be obvious what the shot is about. If you're bothering to shoot a 10-second shot of something, it should be obvious to everyone looking at it what that is a picture of. I should be able to ask a 4-year-old to look at your video and pause it anywhere and say, okay, what's this a picture of? If they can't answer that, if it's just a bunch of people sitting around, if it's just a gaggle of 17 people, everyone looking in a different direction, it doesn't cut it. These are whole chapters here that I'm throwing in, and I'm expecting you to have read them, but the points are pretty basic. The points of these chapters can be gleaned from the 11 Commandments lecture and from the titles of these chapters themselves, more or less. You need to practice. You need to play with your gear, play with your equipment, get it out there and use it and figure out the different things that it can do and what buttons do what. I'm going to show you as much as I can in class. In fact, this is one of the reasons for sort of flipping the class and putting the lectures, some of them online, and bringing the camera into class a lot more. Because I want you to get hands-on experience, and I was learning that people were just not doing the basics of taking the camera out on their own and recording some video before they went to their shoot. People are so pressed for time with work and other courses that they were just hoping that they would figure out how to shoot by checking out a camera and driving over to an event or going to interview people and covering a story. So we bring the camera into class a lot more but that means we don't have time to go into these lectures and do a lot of the finer points. So you've got to read and you've got to understand these things. You have to know that it's good to practice with your gear, good to practice with the microphones, practice multiple times. Make sure you bring fresh batteries. Make sure you know what the manual iris does and where it is. Make sure you get at least the master of manual zoom and autofocus, and make sure you find where the white balance button is and learn how to use it. Learn how to press and hold it, and let the camera set itself up. The chapter zoom with your feet is pretty clear cut, pretty much to the point. Pick the tripod up. Usually you're going to take the camera off the tripod and hold it in your right hand, and then you're going to pick the tripod up with your left hand and fold up all three legs and walk to the next shot. Throw the tripod down with your left hand, spread it out, put the camera on top, and go again. We'll get some practice with that, but you should be getting good at that already by a week or two from now. So zoom with your feet. That means move around. Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes. It's pretty obvious. You've got to be able to, you want to shoot as many shots as you can of actual people, and a subject isn't really easy to see unless you can actually see their eyes. Set and hold a shot. I've repeated that many times. Change up angles. I'm going to show you that. I'm going to demo that in class at least 2 or 3 more times. But that is how you can make sure that you can cover a sequence of wide, medium, and tight, as if you're changing angles in between those shots. Change it up. Be creative, but still make sure that you're letting us know what this is a shot of, what the subject is, what the hero of the shot is. Always, always have well-lit subjects. Always, always. It's the first rule. If video is too dark or if the color is off, I'm going to kick it right back to you without even looking further. One dark shot, one shot that looks like it wasn't well exposed completely blows the entire story. It goes back to you. You will not get that story past me with any frames of dark video, because it just looks unprofessional. Like, why would you, again, going back to the wedding photographer, why would you buy any shots if they didn't have the light turned on for the couple of people they were shooting? So light is key. That's really all you do with the camera, is capture light reflecting off of subjects. You can't start there. You haven't even learned the basics of photography or videography, and you got to go again. How to shoot video that doesn't suck too. Now we're getting into new stuff. I'm going to try to get through these last several slides in a relative hurry. First thing that this chapter, Make Your Stars Look Great, talks about is, again, using light and making sure the subject is well lit. It talks about different moods for different amounts of light. Guess what? We just want the mood of this is clear and straightforward and to the point. So the mood for news is almost always a straightforward mood. So you want to have the light on them, not as bright as possible necessarily. You certainly don't want video to be washed out. We don't want any like medium moody lighting, unless you're in a restaurant where the lighting is that low. We don't want that, and we definitely don't want any kind of dark, sinister lighting. You want to make the people who you're interviewing look good. You want to make them look bright and clear, and all the colors that are present in their face and their skin tones, in their hair, in their clothing should show up. So you use light to make them look good, and make yourself look good too when you're shooting stand-ups. All right, frame up close but not too close. You should be able to see a little bit of room above the head of an interview subject, and you should see down to about their shoulders, just a couple inches below their shoulders. And for God's sake, pull your interview subjects off the wall. That's another thing that is likely to get you sent back. That is likely to get a story sent back to you, unless there's some compelling reason, like the room is only 5 feet across, why they're up against a wall. Otherwise, bring them off the wall, throw a light behind them, or have some backdrop behind them so that they're separated, so that there's just space between them and the thing behind them. Otherwise, it looks like a mug shot. There's no depth of field to that shot. It just looks, it's almost two-dimensional. It looks like a little talking head slammed up against a brick wall more times than not. So if you bring them back off the wall, they will be in focus. The wall will not be in focus. And that's how I know I'm supposed to see them and listen to them. It's very clear. And when you see it done poorly, when you see it done wrong a few times, then you'll see why you need to do it right. Okay, show us where we are. When you get to a scene, shoot establishing shots. One of those may be your best shot for opening your story. I know that there are a lot of things to look for in that first shot. I say it should be your best shot. I say it should have a nat sound break, and it more than likely is going to be some type of establishing shot where we can see kind of a wider angle of what's going on. Whether or not the first shot in a package or in a VO is a wide shot, you do need to shoot an establishing shot and get to it somewhere in the first sequence. Just about every sequence actually has an establishing shot, and you can break other shots out of it. And that's one way, even for a novice who doesn't really know what you're doing, that's one way to get sequences done easily, is to look at a bunch of people sitting outside in the palm tree quad, and you see a professor sitting around in a circle with a bunch of students, and you get a shot of the professor and a couple of students, and he's talking to them, and then you stop that shot, and you're like, oh, the sequence is already made. I just have to go get a close-up, or at least a medium shot from a different angle of the professor, and then get some type of reaction shot from the students, again from a different angle, and that's my sequence. So within every shot, there are at least 2 or 3 other shots that you can get, medium shots or close-ups, that can make a sequence. So don't freak out about sequences. It's not as hard as it seems. The process is a teacher teaching a class. The shots are just the establishing shot of the professor and a bunch of students, then gets some close-ups and some medium shots of the professor, get some reaction where people are actually looking at him, actually nodding or taking notes or doing something, and then you've got your sequence. Okay? Those establishing shots might be the first in your story, but they definitely need to be in the first sequence. Remember, it's all about being interesting, and you have to be the first judge of your own video. If you wouldn't watch it, if you wouldn't be interested by it, why would you show it to anybody else? There are millions of channels now, if you count internet channels. Millions and billions of places for people to spend their time reading stuff. God forbid you ever have to go through Blogger and hit random blog, but there are plenty of people out there blogging about plenty of crap. There are obviously dozens, there are hundreds of cable channels now for people who have cable or for people who have satellite. You're competing with all that for people's attention, and the people who are coming to you are the people who are saying to themselves, I want to know what happened in the community. I want the news. So you don't have to give them some sensationalistic crap. That's not the purpose. Otherwise, if they wanted sensationalistic crap, they would just go over and watch the latest iteration of Honey Boo Boo Child or Jersey Shore, or, I don't know, have they made a Flava Flav reality show for a few years? It's been a while since Flava Flav in Hollywood used to go, year by year, one of them would have a show. You're not competing against that. You're competing against the other news shows, and you're competing against your work yesterday to make sure it's better, and you're competing against the perception that TV news stinks or talks down to people or sensationalizes and lies to people. So that's the perception you have to fight. So be the first judge of your own video. Apply that liberal arts education. Keep developing it in my class. Videography is a creative effort, and we're going to talk about what makes for good stories and what makes for bad stories. We're going to talk about the aesthetics. We're going to talk about what beauty is, why beauty matters, what's the whole point of existence. Sometimes I think a good videographer, if you shoot and edit a great package, you'll see, oh, your life actually has meaning today. You've actually told a good story, and that's a real product. And sometimes there's as much honor in that as there is in just about anything else you can do. So be the judge of your own video. Make sure it's worthwhile. Make sure it's worth your time to put out there into the world. It doesn't mean you have to be all nervous about it and freak out if it's not the best package ever, but when you get a good one, you'll know it. And a lot of it is a matter of saying no to bad shots and not being satisfied with crap. All right? Good enough is good enough. And I will pass you, like I said, there's only 2 grades in the package in my class, 0 and 100. And it's just a matter of how many professional quality packages you get. Your grade depends on how many you get. That's all it really is. So saying no to bad shots is easier said than done when you're starting out, but shoot more than enough so you can cut out all the bad shots, and shoot more close-ups than you think you need. Shoot more well-lit close-ups than you ever think you need, and you might have enough for a package. So shooting the details is kind of the same thing as shooting close-ups. What pros look for when they shoot the details, they look for hands and feet and faces. I'll say it again. When pros are looking for details, when they're looking for close-up shots, they try to see what the hands are doing, what someone's feet are doing, and what the expression is on someone's face. If you can see someone talking and see a reaction, you've just shot about 45% of Desperate Housewives. All right. You shoot the details by shooting faces and shooting hands and what people are doing in this city. Half the stories you're going to go to on campus are going to involve somebody at a piano or somebody playing jazz, or maybe Zydeco if it's a crawfish boil, something like that. So shooting the details means shooting people's extremities, feet and hands, and faces. Use foreground framing from time to time. If you checked out that other VOB and package shot, there's foreground framing of flowers blowing on a bush, and then the background was just, it was raining, it was all gray, and this house behind it, but the foreground was really what we were looking at in that case. We were looking at the flowers, seeing how, boy, all those flowers are going to get knocked off that bush, aren't they? Not going to be all pink and red and green as soon as it's going to be probably just a little shrub, just a bunch of green leaves at that. So I'll show you foreground framing if you want a further description of it, but it is talked about in the book quite a bit. Check the background. Make sure that you don't have trees growing out of people's heads. You don't want light poles coming out of your subject's neck or head, and mix up those angles. Finer points. We'll get to these in detail, but make sure you obey the rule of thirds. Check yourself. Essentially that it's kind of a vague concept. I wish I'd explained it a little better. But this is about being your own best judge. Again, it's about asking yourself, not only would you watch this, but are you proud to put this out and call this your work? And there's no one to blame but you if you don't know how to at least shoot basic video sequences. We've been doing it for 3 or 4 weeks now, and you've had the ability to take out the cameras or to use them in class. So you've got to ask yourself if you're pleased, if you're proud to call what you're shooting professional. If not, try it again. But the secret is there is no secret. It's just having steady shots and having enough light on them and having some basic sense of composition so that we can tell what the subject is in your shot. So always ask yourself, would somebody else know what this is a shot of? Would somebody else say that this is lit well enough? Would somebody else say that this follows the rule of thirds? And if you can answer all those questions, press record. Let it run for 10 seconds and then go on to the next one. Don't be afraid to throw away bad video, okay? Video is cheap. It's not like we're throwing away film that costs $5 a roll or something. I mean, you don't run out of this stuff. You can just use the same card over and over again. If it's bad, throw it away. Try again. So once in a while, you're going to see lucky shots that you got in your video. You didn't even know something was going to happen. You set up to get a shot of somebody scooping up a whole bunch of crawfish, and what happened was somebody dropped a plate and they said, uh-oh, and you've got maybe a kid reacting at a crawfish boil to a little accident that happened. And that's funny, that's interesting. There's no reason not to use that. Sometimes just by being there with the camera and waiting for something to happen, you'll get some lucky shots. So don't be afraid to use them when they happen. And the importance of interviewing can't be underrated. We haven't talked about it much yet because it's still coming up in lectures and because, honestly, the textbook talks more about video than it does about interviewing and video. But we're going to go into that in great detail these next few weeks. The importance of it can't be underrated because that narrative line is driven by the interview. All the examples that I've shown so far have many short, succinct sound bites from several different people. They're just full of interviews. So, your bonus for sticking it out this far. I'm going to skip part 5 of the textbook on the midterm. You should still read it in case there are any good ideas in there, but there are basically 6 parts to the How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck book, and I'm only going to use parts 1 through 4 and some of part 6, a little bit of part 6, to ask questions for the midterm. So, that's your bonus that you get. You know what to skip. You know what you don't need to know. At least that takes one little chunk, several chapters out while you study for your midterm.